Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down-to-earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are Roz Reynolds, Terry Ann Russell, Melissa Brace, and myself, Ivory Lanou. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is healing by changing your beliefs. If you're here with us on the show today and you want to ask a question, you can just raise your hand. We'll unmute you. You can ask it. We'll answer it live on the show. Or if you're shy, you can put it in the chat room and we'll answer it there too. I'll keep an eye on that. If you're watching the show later on YouTube, as so many do, there's an email in the discussion box that you can send your questions to, and you can ask them after too. That's fine. Ay, ay, ay. So, how do we go about this, ladies? Healing by changing your beliefs. Dead silence.
We're all quiet.
Well, it's a complicated subject. I mean, let's face it.
Kind of like choosing to be a victim versus starting to look at it from a different angle where you're not the victim.
And I don't think you can really do anything to get that accomplished unless you really make a commitment to work on elevating your frequency and getting full and complete control of your buttons for faith, hope, and trust. And because you have to believe that it's going to work in order for it to really work. There's no way around it. So it's very painful for, there's a painful aspect to that because you're kind of confronting a part of yourself in a way and looking at that inner part of yourself and saying, okay, I got to step it up. So it's a little traumatizing, I think, a little bit.
And sometimes it can be, past beliefs too from other lives. A lot of people hold on to these beliefs from other lives and we bring them into this life. Also not really recognizing that it's not ours per se, but it's through another past life that we hold these beliefs as well. Hi, Mom. So sometimes it can be that too.
It is, and I know something for me, as a child, I realized pretty early that I'm an observer, and I tend to step outside of situations and look at it. And as a child, it annoyed me, but as an adult, I think it's a good skill to develop because when you can do that, you kind of take yourself out of your own head and you can look at it from other people's perspective or even from just a whole new perspective. And what I like to do with situations is if something really upsets me, and I've dealt with this from stuff from the past, so I'm going to talk about things that happen now. If something new happens that upsets me, I like to just get alone, get some quiet, and think about the situation, but step outside of it like I'm a third person looking in at the situation. And it always helps me start to see where I added to it or what I could have done different or what that person probably meant. That, I might have been thinking worst case scenario and they're coming from a completely different place. But I think that getting into the observer mode is another key aspect of being able to just look at things so differently that you change your whole view of what happened and how it affected you.
Objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So still hard. Still hard. But I mean, you make it sound really easy, but I think we have to really, dig deep and get down into your heart and soul and really do the work.
Make a conscious effort and realize too, like Ivy was saying, just to piggyback on that, when people react or react at you or to you, there's a lot of things sometimes going on behind the scenes that you may not know about them, their upbringing. It doesn't give them an excuse, but seeing it from that different perspective. because I used to be a fighter. You know, I'd be like, "Oh, come at me! I'm gonna come at you!" You know. um, that's my
We're the
mom.
Aries ladies.
That's my mom. She knows. So, but being the observer now, like you were saying, and understanding that person may have other things going on, that they're not necessarily attacking me, but there's something about me maybe that brings up something in them.
And sometimes that observing, what you're going to find out is not that you did anything wrong or could have done anything different, but just helps you let go of it. You know, it's just doesn't help us at all. I think our mental and emotional health and eventually our physical health gets deeply damaged by hanging on to old pains. And especially when somebody says something to me, and I'm sure you've all heard this, I haven't spoken to my cousin in 20 years and I don't even remember exactly what happened. Well, then it's long past time to bury the hatchet in that one and make up and, you know, talk it out and come up with some sort of relationship again, because that's ridiculous. You know, unless somebody's done some horrific thing to you that you're cutting them out of your life forever. But it's almost always some petty thing that, you know, there was a misunderstanding or somebody, like Terry Ann said, they were going through a bad time. They handled a situation badly. Should we cut them out of our life forever for 10, 20 years? I think that's excessive. To me, it is.
I think, you know, that's usually a pain issue. Someone's dealing, you know, holding on to the pain of whatever went on at that time.
Because
And,
they get something out of being a victim.
you know, so
Or it's so attached and ingrained in them, because I think I for all of the years, you know, doing readings and healing and really, like, one of my specialties has always been the energetic aspect. And I've always said, if we can, like you said, observe, step back and realize that we are all coming from different perspectives. Like, you know, just like if you've grown up with, you know, 4 siblings, we all have a different idea of what happened that day in, you know, 1995. And it's just a different perspective. And to unanchor some of those pains, and like Terry Ann mentioned earlier, it could be past lives. It could be stuff that we have absolutely no conscious thought of. And so what if those things are anchored in different layers of our energy systems, and we can shift perspectives and help them heal and come back into wholeness. That's the way I look at things mostly first. And you know, like Ross mentioned, woo, it's so much easier said than done to you know, each one of us have stuff that's been just brutal and confuses us, or you know, sits us down for a while, issues, circumstances and things like that. But it's all worth it to you know, look inside and come back to that place where it, you know, healing. Choose yourself, like choose your path of healing. It's all worth it, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
Right. Sometimes, like I said, we just had this discussion, my mom and I, last week, because Tim and I had a couple words about something, and I got in the car and I was going somewhere, and I was like, "Oh, when I get back, I'm going to tell him this and this and this and this," and and then I heard, "You don't need to do any of that." And my higher self was right, because it was like, it wouldn't have accomplished anything. You know, he has his view about it. I have my view about it. I'm not here trying to change his mind, and I don't want him to change my mind. You know, sometimes you just have to step outside and say, okay, it's not worth going down that path with it, and let it be what it is. And for me, that was a huge shift in my energy, and being able to do that for me, because before I would have been like, what the hell, you know? So for me, I was able to see that then, oh my gosh, I've had a shift now. I'm able to step, especially when it's somebody close with you like that, like your spouse or your parents or your siblings or your children. You know, I was able to actually step outside of that. I was really proud of myself to be able to get to that point. So I think that's important to know also. You can recognize it, and then, you know, changing your perspective, your thinking about that situation.
And I do think that's part of it, is like starting to catch yourself when you realize, oh, I'm starting to go into an old pattern, or, oh, I'm overreacting, I'm getting angry. You know, it's really is catching yourself as early as possible before you really get invested in it and run off on a tangent and saying, I'm probably overreacting to this. Let me think about this for a little bit. It's not that it's easy. It's easier for me because I was like born this way, just an observer, but I don't like it. But anyway, that's another story. But it is a conscious choice you're making. Like any time you change yourself in any way, that's hard work. It's the hardest thing you'll do is to change yourself. But you might as well, because the one thing we know and agree on, you cannot change another person. So you might as well put all that effort into yourself. At least that'll pay off, right?
Yeah, that's the part that's worth it. And when we do that, I mean, I just have noticed miraculous things over the years in my own life, at least, where if I can shift my perspective, go within, and come back into alignment and healing in myself, the whole world looks different. And it can, you know, after the really hardships and the brutal days and crying and questioning myself, if I can shift my perspective, it's almost like a release, and I can feel it, and the whole world is better, and the other people react to me in different ways. And so I always go back to that perspective, and possibly we just might be misunderstanding ourselves all over the place, and like, you know, like pinballs in the world. And we're all here to, you know, lift up in consciousness together, and it's quite a path.
We've been addressing this subject a lot recently. We just haven't called it this, but we've been addressing this about COVID and the restrictions it's put upon us, being home, being more alone, not having your social life, not being able to hug people, you know, all of these things. If you shift your view on that and look at it differently, which we've been talking about, it's giving you time to do more meditation, to do self-reflection, to get your energy at peace and centered and balanced, and all of those things that can be hard to do when you're rushing around trying to do everything that we normally did. So I think it has been like a giant time out for the world. And I'm not sure that this is a mistake. I think it's horrible. People are in the hospital and people are dying and people are losing houses and jobs. Do not think I'm saying I'm happy about that, because I'm not. But I do think that mentally and emotionally, it has been some of benefit to a lot of people.
I just read a really interesting article yesterday, in fact, about how many people, you know, all these animal welfare, you know, the shelters and the rescues and everything, were all just freaking out when this all started. And they were thinking, oh my gosh, you know, there's going to be people that are surrendering their pets because they have to move. They can't. Just the opposite has happened.
Oh, yeah.
People are stuck at home and they're by themselves and they're going bonkers. So they are adopting all kinds of pets. And I was like, oh, well, I could really like that. I could totally get into that deal. Because
I knew that'd make you happy, Roz.
and it is funny, because I started thinking how many people I've talked to, especially over the last few months, who've said, well, I have a new puppy. Well, I have a new kitten. You know? And I was like, yeah, this is cool. Maybe looking at that too. I mean, you know, they've done so much work about how pets make us healthier. How, you know, just having an animal, you know, to keep you busy and to love and spend time with and everything, totally puts you into a better frame of overall health, lowers your blood pressure, you know, makes you sleep better, etc. So I was thinking, wow, you know, that could be a healing modality in itself. And it does elevate your frequency.
And another aspect of that is the people who had to drive through rush hour traffic to go to the office, and then through rush hour traffic to come home, and they lose 2 hours of their day, some of these people, and they're so stressed from the traffic and being at the office. And now so many more people are going to be able to work from home if they want to. If they're, a lot of businesses are just moving to that. They see the benefits now. They won't have to do that. They'll have more time to be with their family in the evening. They'll be able to have a more leisurely day. They can get a few things done around the house, and between doing their work, they'll be more efficient. I just think it's a lot less stress for those people. Rush hour, I've done it a bit when I lived in Phoenix, and it really stressed me out. Just getting there and home was like driving in the Daytona 500, like you take your life in your hands.
At least you're in Phoenix, though. When I commuted to corporate back in the early 90s, it was in New Jersey. And so we had tons of snow, too, to add to that craziness on the road. Route 80, I hated it. Oh, my God. If it snowed, those people couldn't drive. So it would take us forever. But you're right. It took so much time out of your day just to commute and being able to work home. I mean, it is difficult. I did do it for a while when my kids were little, and it is difficult to do also. You have to find that perfect balance of I'm working right now, I'm not playing mommy. So that can be a difficult challenge. But I think with people slowing down, a lot of my clients are really starting to experience that shift, that energy. There's something happening. I mean, I can't tell you how many people come in and tell me, I think I'm going crazy that I've had over the last few months, because they are starting to see, feel, and hear things that they've not heard before.
And you're like, and been there,
done that. That was me. We talk about that all the time too, because I still think it's so funny. But it's like that slowdown has caused them to be able to have that time to meditate, to be able to have that time to go within, spend time outside in nature, notice things they weren't able to notice before. So I think that's also a benefit of the COVID.
That's one of my favorite parts too, where we can kind of slow down and watch and observe, like Ivory said, and touch nature and the animals. I agree. They're just healing in themselves. They know what's going on. They know this awakening inside. They're just gonna nudge us a little bit and help us along the way.
They're tuned in for sure.
I've even been thinking about this the last few days, about just your ambitions with your career. There's so many people who say, well, I can't do that now. I can't go to school because I have children. I cannot pursue this because I don't have enough money yet, or I'm not living in the right, or I want to be married first. They put all kinds of limitations on themselves. There's lots of people who pursue a degree. I was a single parent. I worked 3 jobs and went to college to get my degree. And I know plenty of other people who did it. So it's only a self-limitation in your mind. If money is the problem, well, that's when you say, okay, my barrier, it's not the reason I can't do it, but my barrier is money. So you start looking at ways to get scholarships or ways to get an education. Maybe you do online college that's a lot less and it's just as good and just as valid. There's choices for you out there. Don't let your self limitations get in your way. And I think a lot of people just don't realize they're putting up their own barriers. They're keeping themselves from reaching their goals.
Well, they're accustomed to it, right? They're accustomed to always saying they can't, or it's hard, or I'm trying. I think when you put those things out there to the universe hears you, and it's like, all right, you want a hard? I'll give you hard. I was there also. It was hard, going through a divorce and having a sick child, but the more I said it, I felt like the harder it would get. And it's like, I've got to shift my perspective in this and look at the beauty. And that's another thing I talk about with the grief with Anthony, is I have to look at the beauty that came from this pain, because if I focus on the pain, I'm focusing on the loss. And I don't believe that there is a loss. There's a physical loss, but there's not a emotional, mental, spiritual loss that I have of any kind with him. So it is about shifting that perspective. How do you want to think? Do you want to think life's hard? It's going to be hard. I'd rather think that life is good and it's easy and I'm surrounded by beautiful, loving, caring people, rather than the opposite. So shifting tiny little things throughout your day, catching yourself saying a negative thought. I like to do a mantra that would come to me. It was actually a song that came to me. And so if I started to get like a negative thought, like, oh, my hair looks horrible today, because that one little thing can start it for the day, I would have this mantra I would say, and it would shift it. So I would get to start to notice it. And then when I started notice it, I could catch it right away. And so that's something I like to do to shift that perspective.
I think that's good. Let's talk about grieving, because that's been a big one. You know, every time the holidays roll around, whether your grieving is fresh or not, that's a really hard one. And I think being able to shift your belief on that is huge. You know, and we've talked about it a lot. Coming to the place where you realize that you haven't lost your loved one. And so, do you want to talk about that, Terry Ann? I mean, for you, it's the most fresh.
It is, and Doris is here, and she just lost her daughter to COVID in February, I believe. So
I'm so sorry.
It is, and my mom, and it's been a crazy experience. Grief is so heavy and inundating, and I do experience the pain of losing the physical. That's still very natural for me as a human mother to go through that. But again, focusing on the positive that has come from all of this, the more that he pushes me, like we get into the holidays and I always say, oh, he's not here and all this stuff. And then all this stuff happens and I'm speaking a lot more. I'm doing a lot more sessions, and he wants me working, so he wants me pushing through, helping others, because the more that I could be of service, the better it is for me also. And in helping those people, I'm helping myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, things about keeping your thoughts positive, learning how to connect with your loved one who's not in the physical anymore, really focusing on their presence, the time you had with them, the connection. That connection doesn't go away just because they're not in the physical anymore.
And people have this idea that if you're a medium, that you have such an easy time with the death of a loved one. That is not true. We're humans who happen to be mediums. I know I still have some issues with my dear friend who passed away suddenly 4 years ago. I still have waves of grief just wash over me. But the thing that helps me is I sit down and I call in a spirit, because I know he'll come through for me. And anybody can learn to do that for your own deceased loved ones. I mean, you can feel their energy, you can feel their touch, you can learn to do that. But I think just thinking about the fact that he still is connected to me, we were great friends, we're still connected. I think about you, Terry Ann. I'm like, if Terry Ann could deal with her situation, I can deal with this with my good friend. We have to remember that they're watching over us. They pop in, they let us know if you're thinking about them, you're talking about them, they pop in with you. So just, all the things that can happen, like one of their favorites is just like, I call it a spirit breeze, where you'll just feel like this unexplained cool breeze go across your face, because spirit is like passing through your energy, and you'll have no windows open, no fans on, no movement of air. So that's a big one. But I mean, there's all kinds of things spirit does, but just the more that you stop yourself when you start sliding into the sadness and grief, and just focus on the bond that you still have with them, you'll feel it. You'll feel it, and your energy will start lifting up again. But it's hard, and I can only imagine with losing a child is just that much harder.
It is very difficult. The holidays seem to be pushing me to that point where I'm just like, but like I said, he's always here and he's always pushing me further. So I am learning and I'm growing through all of that, and focusing on that learning and that growth that I'm going through. That's really been, beneficial for me.
And I know it's hard. People who are not a medium, especially if you're grieving, it's that much harder to try to contact, to connect with spirit because you can't get out of your head. So that being able to get out of your head, I think, is crucial. And Roz, you know, you kind of started off by talking about raising your frequency. What's your favorite ways to raise frequency?
Well, I start my day that way, but you know, I have to work on it all day. So I have prayers and affirmations that I say. My you know, most common affirmation that I and prayer that I say all the time is everything is working out for our highest and best good. And I truly, you have to believe that. That's the deal. You have to know that. You have to have faith that that is what is happening. You have to feel that. So, you know, it is work. I also, there's a continuation of that where I talk about how everything is working out also for the best good for everyone around us and everyone that we encounter, that we work with, that we help. I also feel like, you know, the the bottom line here is I think you have to do this in some format or other all day, every day, in some form. And you have to constantly, when you start to go off and drop down into, you know, fear, depression, unhappiness, loneliness, all of these emotions that we kind of get buffeted by, we have to kind of get a grip on those and really go back. And you know, Darianne and I laugh because we're the Aries, the queen of the Aries explosion, you know, which is like the personality of Mount St. Helens. I always tell people, you know, what, just, you know, if I start going off, just get back because I'm going to be fuming and snarling
Lava.
and getting control of that. You know, that's, I don't go into despair. I go into, you know, watch out, I'm going to blow everybody off the planet. So I have to like get a grip on myself and really get balanced with that. And sometimes, I mean, this pandemic time for me has been really challenging for that because I get really annoyed when people don't educate themselves, don't read about the medical, you know, they just read, okay, well, we have to do this and that's going to fix it, you know. So you have to really educate yourself about this stuff. And for me, that's another frequency elevator, is to look at and say, okay, you know, I want to look at this in an intelligent manner. And I want to be calm and objective and get the facts and know, you know, what's happening. So I think we all have to kind of tap into our little toolbox of things that, like we were talking about earlier, you know, things that help us. I pretty much have to stay objective about things because, you know, if I do go to the Mount St. Helens mode, just, you know, everybody get out of the way
Run.
for like half an hour, then I'll come back.
I just hide in my office.
Speaking of the Mount St. Helens mode for the Aries, who have that
Yes.
as well.
We
One of
got
my
3 Aries in this office. Watch
there's
out.
a lot of Aries
And
going
me, the Virgo.
on. One of the things, you know, that I do sometimes, and I've had really, like, a lot of people come against me in my lifetime, as well as for having this job of being a psychic medium for so many years. It was not always popular, right? So there were different aspects, and one of my favorite things in helping, I mean, learning in my path, healing and lifting up my consciousness, is again to step out and look at everyone else's perspective and choose my reality, which usually my favorite part on this talk about Mount St. Helens is where everyone tells me I can't do it. And so I say, you wanna bet?
Watch me.
Watch me.
And
Yep.
I choose my reality. I choose to not do it my way, but not certainly not do it my way like I'm going to knock everybody over like bowling pins, but do it my way in a way that's, I mean, true to myself, true to me. And that's why I've had an adventure of a lifetime because of that. And one of my favorite things, like, you know, Ross was saying, like, start the day and continue whenever you need it with whatever is best, you know, your choice or your perspective of how you view things, but like with prayer and affirmations. And I remember one time I was in quite severe trauma, actually, you know, because I learned through that really well. And I got a whole bunch of index cards, and I did very, like, I taped them all over my house and my car with affirmations and prayers. And when I was mad or sad or scared or confused, I would force myself to go read a page of affirmations and prayers in a positive voice. And I forced myself to go into a mode and that worked for me. And then again, I accomplished or found my direction or stepped out of the grief in different ways where everyone told me I couldn't. And so it happened yesterday. Someone called me, and you know, we all have dysfunction in our families and friends and loved ones, and they're saying, yeah, you're just never going to make it. And I said, oh, it clicked me, and I chose the reality of, but I am worthy, and I have made it, and I stepped out of it and into that wholeness and choice of lifting up consciousness. It was awesome. Speaking of being Aries,
If you don't do that, then you're letting somebody else choose your reality, and that is true. You know, I was just talking to my parents this morning. They're here visiting, and we were talking about the whole thing of somebody in your childhood telling you you'll never amount to anything. For a lot of people, that really did give them the, oh yeah, and they became super successful. But deep inside, I have clients, you know, deep inside, they're very successful, but they still have that pain they carry and that self-esteem issue because of childhood. So it's never too late to dive into that, do the painful work, and really look at it and see who you are now and how untrue that was. It never was true. It wasn't fair or nice, and just discard it. Obviously, you amounted to something. You know, you mounted to something. You don't need to carry around pain from a dysfunctional person in your childhood making proclamations about your future. You know, but it happens a lot.
I think
and
that's why we talk
speaking,
about, go ahead.
I said, speaking of childhood, I have in my experience of not knowing I had those subconscious pieces. Like, I've had a boyfriend that was just brutal to me as an old person. Like, I mean, you know, saying your body is worthless and really brutal stuff that kept bubbling up, and other people would say those things too. And so to me, it was like a mirror, and I went, oh, well, he can't help it because he's, you know, or so-and-so can't help it. And I tried not to take things personally, but take the time to look inside of myself. Not that I didn't know my value. It was a subconscious stuck thing. And it, again, could have been from a past life, and it could have been from yesterday. And but those things harm all of us. And I'm seeing from childhood or yesterday or another lifetime, they almost like stick in layers of our energy. And I'm seeing the coolest thing with the mass consciousness of society, of, you know, humanity, recognize those pieces and go, how can I release this? Like Ivory said, like, how can I let this part go? This is not helping. It's not helping those people. It's not helping me. And it helps balance out everything. And I'm seeing us become more aware and responsible and recognize everybody's value and worth, helping us release the grief and come into healing. And personally and in the big picture, are you all seeing that as well?
I think so. I think it's slower than we thought it would be. I know for me, we talked about it last week. I think how it's slower than we thought it would be, but it is coming about. And, you know, we would talk about that too several times when we'd say, well, there's going to be benefit. You know, we see beauty beyond the darkness. And it was like, how could you see that? You know, this is horrible. And yeah, it is, but there is that beauty. And again, I equate it to the grief. You know, it was horrible, horrible to lose my son, but there is beauty that's come from that as well. And I think one thing we all agree on is that we all talk about the frequency and keeping our frequency at a certain level. And we need to do that for our work in order to be okay. So I think everybody needs to work on their frequency, whether it's gratitude and affirmations, whatever it is, prayer, your Hail Marys, whatever it is that helps you to increase listening to music, your frequency. That will also make it a little bit easier then, because if you're not in that lower vibrational frequency when somebody does come at you, it's a little bit easier then to step back. But if you are in that low frequency mode, you're like, you want to throw down?
For real. That's funny.
I so rarely reach that, but I'm not an Aries, so I just get quiet and think about it.
I think like one thing people don't stop and necessarily think about, and these triggers, you know, these buttons that get pushed and that bring forth. I mean, to me, that's a direct hit from a very low frequency, dark place. You know, it's like somebody's punching you from that place where they want to get that response. So one thing that does help me manage the St. Helens blast is to always remember just what you mentioned, Melissa. Don't take anything personally. You know, the 4 agreements. Take nothing personally. You know, because it really does make a huge impact within yourself if you can look at situations and say, okay, so what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to be getting from this situation? What am I supposed to be learning? You know,
Odds are,
and
if you don't figure out what it is, you're going to be stuck in a cycle.
yeah,
You learn the same lesson through different situations and people over and over and over. You don't learn it. You just keep getting the same lesson until you get it.
yeah.
I'm done
Very
with
good
that.
point.
Personally, I'm done.
Learn that lesson. Don't want to do it again.
Yes, I have. No,
I've been
thank
stuck in
you.
that mode. Uh-huh. Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah, that hurts.
Mhm.
Or when you say
Yeah.
that to people, sometimes they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean it's a mirror? And like, I'm like that. And I'm like, yeah. You need to look at that, why you keep attracting stuff like that. And so there is a reason. Some people do get something out of it, unfortunately. But the people that are ready to heal and move forward, and we've had so many people this year that have really awakened to that. I
Some
think it's
people make themselves more attractive to people who like to take advantage of people. They're not doing it on purpose, but that's something that you can examine if you've been taken advantage of a lot, if you've had a lot of experiences of that sort. I don't think it's consciously you're doing something, but you can take a look at, are you being assertive enough? Are you setting good boundaries? The boundaries is huge, because if you really look back on it, you'll see there was plenty of places where you knew you should get out of that situation or that relationship, but you didn't. You chose not to. And so look what led the pain and trauma it led to by not taking that opportunity that was given you to get out. So
And at the same time, not judge yourself.
exactly,
Yeah.
'cause it's not about you're bad or you're wrong. This is a lesson you're learning. That's what all of it's about. I swear, I truly believe, I've seen visions of this, and I truly believe it, that when we get on the other side and our loved ones greet us, that we get this like debriefing of they're laughing about some of the decisions we made, and we're like, well, I thought I would do better with that. I wanted to really overcome that issue, and like, well, you didn't quite make it with that, did you? Going, well, you did good with that. It's kind of like the most intensive learning situation you can imagine being human. That's what I think. And so some of those lessons are really, really hard, but we don't have to keep making them so hard if we're willing to walk through the pain. And you can't, ignore it forever and expect to get over something. All that happens is it goes from emotional and mental pain to physical pain and physical issues. I'm not saying everything physical has an emotional or mental underlying issue, but a lot of it does.
Being willing, I think, being willing to risk looking at yourself, feeling, pain, like, wow, I wish I wasn't that way. And then being willing to make that change.
Being willing to face your shortcomings,
Yeah.
admit you have them, and be ready to do something about them. Those are the three things.
Because
And a lot of people, I don't want to do that. Well, then you're not going to change.
Yeah, and that's your ego. I mean, your ego is not always your best friend. So
I think it's often not the best friend.
Like I think that's for everybody everywhere.
Yes.
We have those triggers, and that's where I'm kind of seeing, at least, well, I'm trying in myself, like working 100% in myself, like to unplug those, because this is my personal belief, I don't think we learn lessons very easily. Like, humanity is not set up to learn lessons from the most horrifying atrocity, suffering, tragedies. So why don't we unplug those as we rise up in consciousness and all catch on how to come together in like unplug those low, what I would call lower, darker energy programs, so that none of us have to learn from such severity. And as we come into this new era, new age, new year, new time period, where we can really support each other and go, hey, and help us learn in more graceful, soothing ways. But I'm so proud of every person I cross paths with for looking inside of themselves over these last years, and especially this, creepy 2020 year that's been just tough on all of us in some way. I mean, just weird year, for looking inside and choosing, like we were saying, that responsibility, and to not do that again, and not take it personally, so that we can, it's almost like shed the old and come into where we can kind of blossom and go, I do like myself. Oh, I am healed.
And then you're healing yourself, right? And then you're healing also your children, your grandchildren, and you're going back. So when you realize that it's going forward, you're able to be like, oh, wow, I could like heal myself and clear all this stuff so that my child and my grandchildren don't have to go through this. That's a huge shifter for a lot of clients when I explain to them that you're not only doing the work on you now, you're focusing on you and what you need to fix and change, or your beliefs or whatever it is, but that's also healing your children and your grandchildren. And they're like, what? Wow, like I didn't know that. So, having that shift also, because a lot of times people aren't willing to really work on themselves per se, but they're willing to help their children or their grandchildren. So even for some people, that's a huge shift in their perspective to know that.
Enormous. Have you all, as all of us are, known as mediums, that word medium, in the last years, I've seen some of the people in spirit, and our loved ones in spirit, say, come give a message during an appointment and say, you have helped us rise in consciousness, even though we are not still there. It could be like grandparents or great grandparents or someone passed, that in your own choice to heal, helped the heavens as well as our people to come, like our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and those to come. Have any of you felt that as well? Like that we're healing on every aspect and every multidimensional level possible by working on ourselves, by looking inside of ourselves. That's been cool.
I don't know if I would have described it that way, but I feel like when you allow yourself, your energy to move through the different veils and the different dimensional fields and realize that your energy is expanding and correcting and healing all in all those other dimensional fields.
Makes sense.
I have this place I go sometimes. I think of it as being down the wormhole kind of, but where I'm consciously and subconsciously seeing the place that I am, and it's got to be heaven. I mean, it's got to be some version of the ultimate peace and calmness, and nothing can really describe that feeling of the ultimate peace. And I think when we allow our consciousness to expand across these multiple dimensional fields of time and space, that is what we're like a piece of a puzzle, and we're connecting. And our energetic addition to that helps everyone else of the expansion of consciousness, calmness, and all that. So that's the only thing I can kind of equate to what you're talking about. And I tend to do that like when I'm in that weird place between awake and asleep. I know that I've been to this place, and it's pretty amazing. It's really amazing. And then I kind of like, I think I just come back in my body because I kind of go thud. Boom, I've landed. And I've been reading a lot lately about the different sleep frequencies and the brain frequencies, the scientific aspects of all these things, because the sleep frequencies are just amazing. Everything that's going on in your body, in your brain at that time, and in your energy of your consciousness. So interesting stuff.
There was something you said, Melissa, earlier that jogged my mind of something I did want to bring up. When people say things like, well, that's just the way it is, that's the way it's always going to be, that is choosing an outcome, that is choosing a future. I really have, even as a child, had a hard time with that. I can remember telling my dad would say, I'd say, that's not fair. He'd say, well, life isn't fair. And I'd say, well, it could be if we made it that way. And I still feel like when people say, well, that's just the way it is, only if we decide to continue it that way. Just because you've always done it, whether it's on a family level, a business level, or a global level, we've always done it that way is not a reason to continue doing something. That's not. We need to continuously look at things and go, well, that's not working anymore. What could we do that would be better? And I'm a firm believer that taking this whole thing of changing your beliefs and healing goes to a global level as well. We've always done it. This is how it's always happened. That's a cop-out. That's absolving yourself of all responsibility or any kind of connection to what's happening in the world and just saying, well, that's just the way it always was. So instead, that's a good opportunity to start looking around, what's going on out there that could make a difference, that could change this to be better, to work for everybody better now, whether it's in our country, your city, the planet. It all works out. So look around, see what's happening, join something that means something to you, that's making a positive difference in the world, or start your own. Part of the reason Roz and I were talking originally about doing a talk show to begin with is we want to get these positive messages out there. We want to help more people in the world know how to do these things. Not everybody can come see us in Sedona. Not everybody's going to set up a session. We know that. But maybe you'll see our show. Maybe you'll see a topic that interests you, and that will help you start lifting yourself up and learning some new ways to approach situations.
True.
Any other thoughts you ladies have on this topic today?
I just go back to, remember Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? Remember Dr. Phil, he'd always say to people, how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've always always done that. And how's that working for you? We need to say that on a global level. How's that working for you? Well,
Mhm.
we've always polluted the air. We've always thrown our garbage in the ocean. We need to start that. We need to start it. How's that working for you?
That'll be our new motto.
I had forgotten about that. That's hilarious. Some of our
Hi,
folks
Kathy.
are having to go. They got other meetings. Thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here. Are we done today?
We're done.
Everybody talked
I
out?
have a 1 o'clock. Sorry.
Okay. That's all right. Thank you for watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, please visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Big surprise, right? Tune in next week when the topic is manifesting your desires. That is going to be fun. This can be a life-changing one for you, so be sure to be there. Bring a friend. And in the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.